one of the very real questions that I can hear people out there that are listening to this asking themselves right now is, hey guys, I'd love to be able to do what you guys are saying, but I've got nothing left in the tank. I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, that seems like a luxury to me. How do I do that?
Mm-hmm. I think I'd have to push back on that because I think that that
Oh,
is a
really?
privilege question, not from not that you're wrong that they would say that, but I push back in the sense that like, okay, um, you don't think a small producer or coffee producer isn't exhausted? You don't think that the people who
Yeah.
make coffee possible aren't dealing with this? I think a huge portion of our inability to understand what's going on in supply comes from the fact that we just don't want to deal with discomfort. And we don't want to deal with the fact that it's
Mm.
super complicated.
If you've ever thought about doing business in the Middle East, or you're just curious about what's happening in one of the most exciting coffee markets in the world, we've launched a new direction for the Map of Forward Middle East podcast as an invaluable resource to help you find out more about doing business in the region. It features real conversations with values-driven entrepreneurs and businesses that have been operating in the region for years. Just as the global podcast, the Map of Forward Middle East podcast will talk about opportunities, challenges, and the reality of building something sustainable in a fast-evolving market. The show is in English and the guests are deeply inspiring. Search Map of Forward Middle East wherever you get your podcasts, hit subscribe and share it with your friends. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of an awesome 5-part series with Brendan Adams from Semilla Coffee in Canada. Folks, yesterday I recorded a conversation with Reza Kosar from Iran, but he has a business, Slick Coffee Co. in Oman. And today we're recording this one with Brendan Adams. These 2 series could be the best 2 series so far this year. And we have had some fucking amazing series this year. But these 2 conversations go to the heart and cut all the bullshit out of what's happening in the coffee industry. Go and see the series with Reza if you haven't seen it, because he goes straight to the heart of what is the problem with our the way that we're talking about quality. And this conversation is going to the heart of why we perhaps may think that we're trying to make coffee better and how we're missing the mark every fucking time. And I really had the impression that this was going to be a great conversation. I had no idea it was going to be this great. Brendan, I can't thank you enough for the conversation so far. In this episode, we're talking about what questions should we be asking about the supply chain. Now, there's some context that I wanted to give everybody. For those who didn't understand what Brendan was talking about with regards to consolidation. And a lot of people are confused about this. And we're going to look at some questions, Brendan, around this kind of stuff as we go through this episode. Here's what's happening right now. For the last 20, 30 years, people have been building businesses off cheap coffee. And cheap coffee in the commercial market and cheap coffee in the specialty market. We're not talking about high-end coffee. We're not talking about those, really rare coffees that sell in auction lots. We're talking about your everyday specialty coffee, quote unquote. It's all been cheap. And we have asked coffee farmers, not directly, but indirectly, we have said to them, invest in specialty coffee, invest in quality, and eventually this will be a wonderful return on your investment. Trust us. And we betrayed them. And as a result of that betrayal, 2025 is giving them every reason to say, fuck you and your specialty coffee. I'm sending everything to the commercial market. Right, Brendan?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, writ large, for sure. I think that like the way in which supply has worked on the origin side, where it was basically just like work really hard and get a tiny little premium or maybe none. I think we talked about this before. In many countries, like people don't understand, like there is no premium.
No.
Just because you paid more money for it FOB, there was no premium to the grower. And if there
you
was a
paid
premium to the
for it at
grower,
all.
Yeah,
if you paid for it
exactly.
at all.
Yeah, for sure. If it was even
Like
paid for at all. Yeah.
so
No, it's
many
a
of these
massive gap.
farmers, so many of these farmers have been told, whereas let me start here, the commercial market, you sell your cherry into the commercial market, you sell your coffee, however it is, into the commercial market, it gets there, you get paid for it.
Okay.
Specialty, what's happening is that they're being promised that they're going to get paid a premium in inverted commas, but they're not going to get paid until that coffee arrives at the consuming market. They have had to fund that coffee the whole way. And then what does the person say once they've received the coffee? Listen, I don't really have all of the money right now. Can I pay you 25% of it? And so they're paying that over the space of a year. So 2 years later, these farmers are getting paid. In that time, they've had to pay for the next harvest, for the fertilizers and for labor and for all of that, plus the harvest from the one that you bought from them.
Mm-hmm.
We have not delivered on the promises. In most cases, there have been people who have come on this podcast and waxed poetic about, we take care of producers and we do this and we do that about producers, only for those producers to then contact me and say, do you know that person owes me $300,000? Do you know that person owes me over $1 million?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
100%. No, and I think like the people you're speaking to, they have, it's not a slight against them, but they're the ones that had the ability and the access and the funds to get that coffee into a container,
Exactly.
export it. So then think downstream from those people, which is most of the country, right? Most of these producing countries are people who like they have a cherry. Like again, to what Semilla does, the people we work with are people that when we met them or connected with them, 90% of those communities, 95% of those communities sold their coffee and cherry. So they picked it off a tree and someone drove by that day or the next day, paid them in cash. Was the money good? No, it was not good, but it was cash, you know? And so one of the things that fundamentally in specialty, like always there'll be a delay in specialty coffee buying. Why? Because of quality. Because I have to fundamentally, make sure that there's no quality claim in the future for me when I pay more money for that coffee. And so no matter what, we're gonna have to wait for the coffee to get delivered to the mill, which means that we're gonna have to wait until it's been dried. And then we're going to have to wait until everybody's ready, and then we're going to have to deliver the coffee, and then we're going to have to cup it, we're going to have to assess it, we're going to have to pay them. Even that part is hard, right? Like that part. And many people still don't do that, right? They say, oh yeah, deliver it, give me a coffee, and then like, who knows when you're going to get it? It's just like it's an ongoing process. And I think that this is something we have to be very clear-eyed about, right? I think a lot of people don't recognize that that is just like a basic reality of specialty coffee. That if we want to have a
Right.
quality demand for coffee, it means someone's going to wait. Because until you're willing to just accept coffee from X producer at any level of quality when it shows up at a good price, they're going to have to wait because you can't give them full price for a coffee that like on the other side you're not going to pay for, right? And so that's where you end up in a scenario where like someone like us takes a lot more risk for those smallholders because then we're the ones that are holding that bag for them and saying, okay, we bought it from you, no questions asked, we'll figure it out. And we pay like a big chunk on delivery, and then we sort out the premiums once the coffee ships. But like coffee is always paid within the harvest cycle, and it has to be, right? But the reality is like you said, much more akin to what has happened here. Whether there's whether the coffee's paid at all, let alone when it lands, is a whole nother subject. So I think that regarding conventional coffee and the commercial market going up, this is a really funny thing for us this year. And I think it goes back to some of the earlier episodes. We talked about the need for true relationships, right? And the need for real buying. Like, I think we always look at it in the sense of transactionality, right? I think a big thing that's happened, again, when we do that then versus now scenario that we talked about the other day, then you needed a real relationship with trust in order to get good coffee from someone, or you weren't going to get it. At least I assume so, because that's what we need to do. But now, when you say, I have a relationship with someone, it usually just means you bought something from somebody. And then you say, that's a relationship, 1 year. Is that a relationship, though? Like when you go to the grocery store
Yeah.
and you buy some tomatoes, even when you go to the farmer's market and you buy from the farmer, do you have a relationship with those people? Like, that would be
No.
insane.
You had a
That
chat.
would be an insane, it
You
would be
had
an
a
insane
chat.
thing to say. You would be like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? That's not a relationship. You bought from a local vendor. Good for you. But we need to like position it like relationship. Okay, we're going to use the word relationship. Then let's actually do things you do in a relationship. You share risk. You take emotional labor. You have hard conversations. that's a relationship, right? And so I think that like those kind of things, when you invest in that, you won't have a problem getting coffee. We didn't have any problems in Guatemala this year. Well, every single exporter I talked to was like, oh, 10%,
Yeah,
oh,
can't get
50%
coffee out,
production.
can't find
Yeah,
containers, right?
of course. Well, yeah, because like A, you were unwilling to pay for it, or you never did pay for it. And someone else was like, this year, one of the most exciting things for me in places like Guatemala was sitting across from producers who I'd never met before because I had the chance to meet a few new producers and watch them probably for the first time in their life in real time be a price setter. Say, no, I want
Nice.
this. And you're like, wow, okay, that's fine. I get that. But most people are just going to say, see you later, I'm out. Because like they don't want, even if they agree the price should be that,
Mm.
just for that dynamic to flip, where a smallholder producer who runs a 1 hectare farm will come to you as a locally empowered stakeholder who runs a massive dry mill and is doing whatever you do in your day-to-day life. Like you don't want to be in a scenario where suddenly a precedent gets set that someone tells you what to pay. And I'm not
Mm.
saying that as like a personal indictment of those people. That's just a fundamental structural problem of the industry, right? Is that as long as there's a system in which like people need to make sure that they don't buy really expensive coffee, expand their or use all their liquidity and take a bunch of risk on something they might not be able to sell to somebody else, it's always going to be tricky. But that's also because inside of that whole context, there isn't a human-centered relationship that's trying to say, I bought from X person at this price. Yes, that's a super high price for an 86-point coffee, but he needed it, he wanted it, and we did it. So like, you want to be part of that interaction? Let's go. And I think that like there's a ton of people out there that want to be part of that interaction and it need to be part of that interaction. But more and more the industry seems to be shying away from that. Rather than recognizing the writing on the wall and like that you're going to lose your coffee to the conventional market, that you're going to lose your customers who are looking for an actual like relational coffee, and you may not have supply at all. We're just like, nah, I'm not doing that. It's kind of crazy to me seeing how like the
Mm.
way in which that taking it for granted is just playing out, even when like there's an obvious sea change, I would say, that we should probably just embrace and recognize that it really wouldn't affect us that much if we could just like get on board with it and recognize that like we can make that work. It's just not exactly the way it worked for the last 20 years.
But if we want to do that, we have to accept the realities of 2025.
Hmm.
And it, if we're looking at, what are the questions that we should be asking about the supply chain? One of the very real questions that I can hear people out there that are listening to this asking themselves right now is, hey guys, I'd love to be able to do what you guys are saying, but I've got nothing left in the tank. I can't do it.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't, that seems like a luxury to me. How do I do that?
Hmm. Um, I think I'd have to push back on that because I think that that
Oh,
is a
really?
privilege question. Not from your, not that you're wrong that they would say that, but I push back in the sense that like, okay, um, you don't think a small producer or coffee producer isn't exhausted? You don't think that the people who
Yeah.
make coffee possible aren't dealing with this? I think a huge portion of our inability to understand what's going on in supply comes from the fact that we just don't want to deal with discomfort. And we don't want to deal with the fact that it's
Mm.
super complicated. And so I'm not going to lie to you, Samia has been an emotional roller coaster for me. This job
Yeah.
is
I
I would
can
never
imagine.
trade it out, but I'd be super honest about it. And it's a big conversation I think we should be having. Burnout is real. Emotional labor with
Word.
peripheral smallholders where you are the person holding the bag and responsible to them is super, super hard. But it has to happen because if it doesn't happen, nothing changes. And I think that this is the big question for all of us is that at what point are we going to recognize our personal accountability and responsibility to know more as industry actors who are fundamentally paying our lives and our families off of that? So we can try to do it in a more benevolent way, yes. But at the end of the day, we're all part of a system where, like, as long as that coffee exists, we pay our bills off of that coffee. And if we don't invest in making sure that we understand that supply chain better, at the end of the day, when all the chips fall on the table, what's the big difference going to be between someone who bought specialty grade coffee and someone who bought conventional grade coffee in the destruction of the coffee supply chain? Do you know what I'm saying?
You know, I absolutely know what you're saying. Our our vision at Mapper Forward, we don't talk about it very often, but our vision is to have an industry that builds responsible businesses with responsible pricing models.
Hmm.
That's what that's everything that we do at Map It Forward is with that. in mind, right? And for the longest time now, I've been thinking that this term specialty coffee, we need to get rid of this term specialty coffee and start focusing on how do we build responsible businesses.
I agree. Yeah.
Because the person who's asking the question and saying, Lee, Brendan, I love what you guys are saying, but I've got no fucking idea how I get there. I'd love to be able to, but I have no margins left. Trump's fucked me with regards to these tariffs, and I just don't know how we can't get access to spot coffee anywhere.
Yeah.
So everything is just really, really hard. We can't get access to labor. We can't get access to any of these things. You know, the thing I constantly ask myself is, if our industry was focused on education with regards to responsible business ownership instead of quality, how different our industry would be.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, this is where we've talked about in past a lot about how like the quality scenario is really akin to like neoliberal economics. It's like trickle down theory.
Word.
Like if you buy quality, it's all going to trickle down through the system and it's all going to be just and fair, you know? And it's like, well, that's not working. Like
That's
macro level, but also
It's a
within our
straight up
industry,
lie.
it's not working. You know, it's not a thing. And so you're totally right. I think that like fundamentally, so yeah, I get it. You're totally right about the responsible businesses, and I get it. Like it's a lot. What we're asking people is a lot, and I've had this happen in real time. Like I've just explained what we do with Semilla to some of our clients, and had people just like shut down. It's
Right.
a lot. You know, I don't know why. I'm excited about that, I guess, but whatever. There's some weird tick in my
I'll
brain
tell
where
you
like
why
it's
you're excited
really
about
satisfying. But I think that I mean, I think it's just really
I think
satisfying to know that you can be part of something that is a little bit different. You know what I mean? And is trying at least not, we would never say that we're perfect. And I know that there's a million things every day I wake up being like, we failed on that, you know? But it's the notion of working towards something that is based in like a horizon that we know the producers have asked for, that we're trying to get there together, you know? And so I think that there are short-term, quick ways that you can get involved in this. And I think it means, like, I think it goes back to the last episode of like sitting down and thinking like, what are you doing this for? Are you just trying to win on quality coffee? Then like you need to like then take the thought experiment of where does this go? Like we discussed last episode.
there's
Where are you going with
easier
this?
ways
Where
to
is
make no money.
exactly? So it's like, are you really going to break your back on this? Because like that's a good question to ask. So if the question is you don't just want to do quality and win, you want to do this because you care, then you start really dedicating yourself to making sure that you find the people that are there, because we're not the only ones. I don't think there's a ton of people out there that are engaged in work like we are, but there are people out there, you know, and even if it just means other peers and colleagues who are also roasting or also running a cafe that care about that, developing like solidarity and community around that is super important. And I think that um, there's very like quick ways that you can start to understand that. And I think that like we're a really good example in the sense that like 6, 8, 10 years ago, I didn't know any of this stuff. You know? I know what I know because I went and listened to people. You know, no one taught me as much about coffee than a smallholder producer. Nobody in the global north has taught me a fraction of what I've learned in coffee. And all it came down to was like, get on a plane, ask for permission to be somewhere, and sit with someone and listen to them and honor their truth, and then say, okay, is there something we can work on this together that would make this better for you? Even if it's not going to be perfect, even if it's going to have a whole bunch of challenges, do you want to try that? And there you go.
Yeah.
You know, like it's as simple as that. So I think that as complicated as the supply is, it's also exceedingly simple to figure out a way to like do different in that. And it really just comes down to like, you have to define what your priorities are and what your questions are, right? And so if it's really important to you to know that the cherry that is part of the co-fermented coffee that you bought came from a good place, ask the person. And if they don't give you a satisfactory response, well, you learned something right there. You know, if they didn't give you the answer that you wanted, you kind of know where to go.
That's information. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that leads us into like the next episode, folks. This is where we're going to go really deep on what Brendan's just said. Who holds the truth about origin? And it ain't who you think it is. Okay, it's not your importer. Just so that you know. Join us for the next episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.